So how would you actually draw a picture of an entire economy? I'm not talking about just a single number like GDP, but the whole messy, complex process of production as it unfolds over time. Well, today we're going to dive into a really fascinating visual tool from the Austrian School of Economics that tries to do exactly that. It's called the Hayekian triangle.
So here's our game plan. First, we'll get our heads around the basic structure of production. Then we'll introduce the triangle itself. After that, we're going to roll up our sleeves and deconstruct the economy with a really clear example, see what happens when savings come into play, and finally, we'll take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Okay, let's start with a really foundational idea. The economy isn't just one big thing that happens instantly. It's a process, right? It's a whole chain of production where goods are transformed step by step, over time. It's a journey from the most basic raw materials all the way to the stuff you buy in a store. I mean, think about a simple loaf of bread. The story doesn't start at the bakery. No way. It starts way, way earlier, with mining the iron ore to build the tractors, then growing the wheat, then milling that wheat into flour, and on and on. Each of these steps is a stage of production, and the more stages you have, the more time and complexity it takes to get to that final product. So you've got all these interconnected stages, all happening over time. But how in the world can you visualize this entire economic structure at a glance? Well, that's where this really clever tool comes in, the Hayekian triangle. It was developed by the Nobel laureate Friedrich Hayek, and it basically acts as a map of the economy's entire production process. It's this brilliant way of plotting out all those stages over time and linking them to one of the most critical prices in any economy, the interest rate.
Think of it this way. Low interest rates are a signal that capital is pretty abundant, it's cheap to borrow. This encourages businesses to invest in more complex, roundabout, long-term projects, which makes our triangle longer and flatter. On the other hand, high interest rates signal that capital is scarce, so businesses favor shorter, more direct production methods. That makes the triangle shorter and steeper. The slope of the triangle basically shows you this whole trade-off.
Okay, theory is great, but to really get this, let's look at a common way of drawing the triangle and put some actual numbers on it to bring it to life.
Let's imagine a super simple economy, where, in one period, people spend a total of 100 ounces of gold on the final product. Let's stick with bread. So this 100 ounces is the total revenue for all the bakeries. But where does that money actually go from there? Well, it doesn't all just stay with the bakery owner. Of that 100 ounces, 80 of it goes up the chain to pay the flour millers for their flour. Another 10 ounces go to the bakery workers as wages. And that final 10 ounces? That's the profit. Or you can think of it as the interest earned on the capital that was invested to get this whole process started. So how do we figure out the rate of return in this model? Now, this is a really key point. It's not simply the profit you made. It's the profit you earned compared to the capital that was put up, that was advanced before a single loaf of bread was even sold. See, the capitalist running the bakery had to pay 80 ounces for flour and 10 for labor ahead of time. That's 90 ounces of capital they advanced. So earning 10 ounces of profit on that 90-ounce investment gives them a return of about 11%. And here's the cool part. In this simplified model, that same 11% rate of return cascades all the way down through every single stage of production.
This also lets us see pretty clearly how we calculate GDP, or the total value added. The bakery took 80 ounces of flour and turned it into 100 ounces worth of bread, so they added 20 ounces of value. The flour mill did the same, adding 20 ounces of value to the wheat, and so on down the line. If you sum up the value added at each of our 5 stages, guess what? You get the total GDP of 100.
Okay, so we have our stable economy all mapped out. But what happens if people's behavior changes? What if they start to save more? How does that actually change the shape of our triangle?
Well, if people are saving more, that means there's more capital available for businesses to borrow and invest. This makes capital less scarce, and so its price, the interest rate, naturally falls. So let's say it drops from our 11% all the way down to 7%. How does the very structure of our economy adapt to that?
This is where it gets really interesting. The entire economic structure literally reshapes itself. Because there are more savings, people are spending a little less on consumer goods right now, so that spending falls from 100 to 80. But, and this is the crucial part, that new lower interest rate makes it profitable to fund longer, more sophisticated production processes. Our structure actually expands from 5 stages to 7. And this leads to a fascinating and maybe a little counterintuitive point. That immediate drop in spending doesn't mean the economy's getting poorer. Not at all. In fact, that increased saving and investment is what finances a longer, more capital-intensive, and ultimately more productive process.
In the long run, this can lead to even more goods being produced, lower prices, and a higher standard of living for everybody.
So the Hayekian triangle gives us this really unique way to visualize the economy. But, like any model, it's a simplification. It's built on certain assumptions, and it's really important that we understand what those are.
What's really cool is that the model's core insight that saving and investment are the real engines of a more productive economy, that aligns beautifully with mainstream growth theories, like the Solo model. It provides this great visual for how higher investment per person can lead to higher income per person.
Now, just to be clear, this basic model makes a few big assumptions to keep things simple. It assumes the total amount of money in the economy is fixed and that a single interest rate applies to all projects, whether they're short-term or long-term. In the real world, of course, these things can and definitely do change.
And this all leads us to a final and absolutely crucial question. We've seen how real, genuine savings can lengthen and enrich the structure of production, making us all better off. But what happens when interest rates are pushed down, not by genuine savings, but by new credit just created out of thin air by a central bank? How does that warp the triangle? Well, that is a story for another time.